So in this video, I want to give you an introduction to probably the most important feature of Bootstrap, and that's utilizing the column system, the column layout system, the grid system. These are all terminologies that refer to what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to go underneath this code here. This is the end of the container. I'm just going to give you a demonstration of this. So in order to lay out information on the page, Bootstrap has a grid system. So we need a div. I'm going to include a new class, and I'm going to call it container, as we did before. I can't find the key. Okay, right, so we've got a div, and then we end this div. So this is a container. So in a container, we know what container is from the previous video. I'm just going to contain all the information. So what we want to do now is set up a row. So we're going to build a new div. Class equals row. The mic's in the way, I can't see the keys. Row. And then div. So this is going to create a row. So just imagine I'm building a row. Well, okay, so now we're getting serious. We've got paint on the go. So this is what we're building. Brushes. So what we've done was we built a container. So this is our container. And what we're doing now is we're building a row. So what we're saying is we're going to build another kind of container inside of this container. And this is the row. Now, Bootstrap has a grid system, like I've alluded to, and this system uses a 12-column system. So inside of every row, there's going to be 12 columns by default. 12 columns. And what we need to do is determine where we want these columns. So, for example, if we wanted a center aligned, if we wanted two boxes in this row, then what we would need to do is we'd need to count 6 and define a div with 6 columns, and then we'd need to find another div and define it with 6 columns. So we're always utilizing all the 12 columns. So we're going to use 6 columns here, and we're going to use 6 columns there. So we're going to set up 2 divs. So let's put that into practice. So if I go down here, inside the row, we're going to create a new div, and we're going to say class equals col 6 columns. Yep. And then we need to close that div. Okay. So then we're going to create another div with 6 columns. So if I put an A here and then a B there, so we can define which columns are which. So we've got container. Inside this container we've got so we've got a container. Inside this container we've got a row. So I'll just put that row there. So I'm just tabbing, you can see, so it makes a nice structure, so I can see a bit clearer where my row is and where my column is. And inside of here I've got 2 divs, column width of 6. So let's go back into here. We'll go down here, and you can see at the bottom here we've got A and B. So going back to here, remember that A is going to be here, B is going to be there. That's exactly what I've just created. 12 altogether, but I've just separated it up. So if I change this to a 3, then obviously I would need to change this to a 9, because 3 plus 9 is 12. So it always needs to add up to 12. So if I go back into my code and change that to 3 and that to 9, we can now see in the code that my B is moved across here, because obviously this is using 9 columns and that's just using 3 columns. So you can see that's how I'm going to start developing maybe some of my page or structuring my page by utilizing this column system. So let's utilize this to add some cards. So I'm just going to get this card. Remember, that's the end of the container, so I've not touched that. So inside of this column, I'm going to put that there and put that there. So there's 2 cards. I put that together and you can see, wow, there we go. I've now got 2 cards. So if I were, for example, now to, this is where it gets a bit tricky to follow. So this is my column. Now, this is my row, this is my column, this is my media. Now you can see this is getting tricky to follow. So what you can do is if I highlight all of this and press Shift and Tab, that's going to move it all back. And then I press Tab, and you can see now I've got a nice division here. This is my column, this is my div. What you can do, you can tab everything inside of that div a little bit further if you want to, and you can see there's a nice structure here. So I can do the same thing again here. So make sure I select the card. I press highlight and press Shift and tab it all across, and then I tap that inside element and it looks a bit nicer in terms of usability. So what I want to do now is take this column, this 6 column, and I want to copy and paste it. So now I've got 3 columns, but you can see I've got 3 columns of 6, which is obviously more than 12. So I want to just change these to 4. 4 plus 4 plus 4 obviously is 12. Always maintain that 12. And then I go back here, and you can see now it's nicely lined up. Now, obviously one of the issues here is the fact that it's not lined up nicely, because it's nicely lined up here because everything's aligned to the left, but there's some gaps here on this side. It needs to be lined up. So how can we overcome that type of thing? Well, probably the easiest way to overcome that problem of this gap at the end is just to remove the width. So let's get rid of the style, of all the cards. So each card, I'm just going to remove the style. And this one. Just make sure you don't delete that end chevron. And then I press refresh. And there we go. Everything's nicely lined up. And of course, if you really wanted to, remember this is the row. So if I copy from the end of the div row to the top of the div row, and then I paste it, again I'm inside of the container. If I paste it, I now have 2 rows. So row 1 and then row 2, and would you believe it, I now have 2 wonderful rows. So you can see there's a problem here. There needs to be some sort of gap. So what we can do is we can add padding and margin to this to align this up, and that's what I'm going to show you in the next video, using padding and margins, or defining the padding and margin of elements.